'Cause I'm living for the moment, and all I wanna do is touch you one more time before I go. 'Cause it feels so good.
What's up, Seattle Sports Nation? How's it going? Long time no here, I guess you would say, for a podcast. But we are back, and don't you worry. So we'll be going over some Seahawks talk, Mariners, of course our toss-up section, some Husky football and basketball. Obviously the big news as of late is the Seahawks' third loss of the year. Yesterday afternoon against the much improved from last year Arizona Cardinals with Bruce Arians looking like a pig coaching from the sidelines. But yeah, so what do you think about the loss yesterday, Jackson? What do you think the Seahawks could have done better throughout the game?
They could have done pretty much everything better. They did not play well in any phase of the game. The offense was terrible. They were like 2 of 13 on third down. Russell Wilson had his second worst completion percentage as a professional quarterback.
I think that was his worst game of his career.
Yeah, I think it is too. Marshawn Lynch only had 11 yards in the second half, and the usually stellar special teams was non-existent with
the turban fumble.
The turban fumble. Husky with his first true miss of the year.
Geez.
John Ryan had his worst punting game of the year. It was just a horrible game all around.
He averaged 37 yards punting. I know a high school kicker at Redmond High School who averaged more yards than John Ryan in a season than John Ryan's average last game. So
obviously no one played well. But that being said, no one really played well, and we still barely lost.
Sherman with those 2 picks.
Sherman played decent.
Did he get beat a couple times? Was his coverage
he played all right. His coverage
wasn't
great, but it was acceptable. And we lost. No one really played all that well. And we still barely lost to a team that is on the verge of potentially making the playoffs. They
deserve to make the playoffs.
Their defense is top 5. They have a lot of weapons, and like I wrote about in my takeaways column, which will be going up shortly.
Maybe.
Imagine this team with Kaepernick or with Cam Newton as their quarterback. Even guys that isn't as good as that.
The Cardinals.
The Cardinals. Their defense is great. They have a lot of weapons. If they had someone who's making better decisions and can make more throws as a quarterback, they could be a really, really strong team. So
yeah, I'm hoping that they make the playoffs too. I mean, they'd be a fun team to watch in the playoffs. I mean, their defense is fun to watch. I think whatever draft position they end up in next year, I think they'll try and draft a franchise QB.
Definitely.
Maybe to kind of bring him along since this QB class is so strong. You know, Manziel, Bridgewater, Mariota should be in there, but he's not. Who else do they have in the QB classes here?
The kid from UCF.
Oh yeah, the Central Florida guy. There's a couple others too to watch, but yeah, that'll be definitely interesting to see how they draft next year. But
for them to make the playoffs, though, they got a tough road to hoe. They need either the Niners to lose this week or the Saints to lose next week, and all that needs to be with them beating the 49ers next week. So they have a tough road to hoe, but we will all be Falcons fans tonight against the 49ers.
The last game in Candlestick Park. Watching ESPN right now. That new stadium looks really nice.
It's supposed to be
Santa
tight.
Clara.
It's going to be tight.
Yeah, for sure.
So with the Rams at home next week, what do you think the keys are to that game, Marshall, for the Seahawks?
You know, the first game was...
It's a battle.
Kind of reminiscent of last week's game against the Cardinals.
Yeah, I would agree.
It was Russell Wilson was not playing well.
The defense was solid.
The opposing defense was destroying the D-line and Quinn and Chris Long. So I think the key for the game this week will be to really execute on offense, not just kind of getting the run game going or pass game going. I think it's key to get the pass game and run game going at the same time. Also, to feed Marshawn, he only had, I think, 18 carries against the Cardinals.
He had 60 yards in the first half and 11 in the second half.
He needs to have 25 carries a game at least, and I think he can get the yardage he needs for the Seahawks to win against the Rams defense.
Yeah, and I think talking more about Lynch, that the ball control and time of possession are things that the Seahawks are usually pretty good in. But yesterday they ran like 15 less plays than the Cardinals, and their time of possession was significantly worse. So if you can pound the rock, control the ball, and keep that time of possession in your favor, I think that would be really beneficial, and also potentially slow down that pass rush of the Rams.
I think the Seahawks offense needs that kind of tempo too, for Russell Wilson to get in a groove, kind of run a little bit hurry up, no huddle offense.
Yeah.
I think that would help him kind of break out of this little funk he's been in against the Niners and the Cardinals. So I think maybe a little up-tempo play calling by Darrell Bevell, who didn't have his best play calling game yesterday, would help out. But we will see what happens.
Yeah, so I think that obviously if they win, they're the number 1 seed. But in the NFC, the playoffs are pretty crazy, and essentially the Seahawks are either the number 1 seed when they win, or if they lose, there's a good chance that they get overtaken by the 49ers for the division, which would mean the 49ers are the number 1 seed, and the Seahawks would drop down to a wild card team, which would mean that they not only would lose out on home field throughout the playoffs, they would lose out on home field in the first round. They would have to go to a team like Philadelphia or Green Bay or Chicago, which are obviously teams that are beatable, but when you have to go on the road, those are teams with potentially some potent offenses that could really show us some trouble.
Yeah, so that'll be very interesting to watch. I think the team should be motivated coming off the Cardinals' loss. I think it's good in a sense for them to not hold their heads too high against the remaining NFC foes. And like Jackson was saying, no NFC divisions have been decided, and all AFC divisions have been decided. So that's pretty interesting to see. So, and it's the seeding for the AFC's kind of taking shape, and maybe we will predict who the Seahawks could face in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and so I think we're going to finish up with some Hawks stuff by starting with our toss-up section next. So first up on the docket is Percy Harvin. He will not play this week, and so it remains to be seen whether he will be on the Seahawks playoff roster. But Marshall, with the Seahawks' offensive struggles as of late, do you think Percy Harvin is a necessity for this team to make it to the Super Bowl?
I wouldn't really call him a necessity for the Seahawks to make the Super Bowl, but I think he is that extra needed luxury that the team needs to make it to the Super Bowl. Like I kind of view it as this. So there's always, when you're looking for a brand new car, right?
Yeah.
There's always the cars that are in the lot, and then you could order special additions.
Sure,
like,
sure.
Whatever.
GPS and all that.
I think
all that good stuff.
Like the Seahawks team right now being that car, I think Percy Harvin is all those little luxury items you could add, like the GPS.
Makes your car that much
heated
better.
Seats or something like that. I think that's exactly what Percy Harvin is to the team. But I don't think he's a necessity.
I think that's a fair, interesting metaphor you got there. But I think
it's a great analogy. What are you talking about?
It's great. You're right. My mistake. I think Percy Harvin would definitely spark the offense, even if he doesn't play a full set of plays. But I think I'm holding out hope that this team can turn it around and get back to where they were at the beginning of the season. Because if they play as good as they were earlier in the season, they absolutely can make it to the Super Bowl. And that was obviously without Percy Harvin. If they sort of stay in this holding pattern that they're in, of the offense slowing down and the defense having to lead them to victories, then I think they would need Harvin to spark them. I think Russell Wilson and Pete Carroll and Darrell Bevell can turn it around. But that remains to be seen. So I think I'll say no, he's not a necessity, but obviously he would be a big help.
There we go. There's some agreement. So now the next toss-up subject is who would be the tougher playoff opponent for the Seahawks, the 49ers or the Panthers?
Ooh, that is a tough one. Both are teams with very strong defenses, similarly to the Cardinals, who gave the Seahawks troubles at home. Both of which are teams that the Seahawks have beaten this year. The Seahawks have also lost to the 49ers, obviously. So obviously both are gettable wins because we've beat them both when we played in Seattle. But I think just because of the division aspect and Harbaugh and the fact that the 49ers and the Seahawks know each other so well, I'm going to say the the 49ers would be a tougher playoff match.
Yeah, I would say the 49ers too, only because I still remember the Panthers coming into Quest Field like 4 or 5 years ago for the NFC Championship with Jake Delhomme, and they got absolutely obliterated. And I think, I'm not saying this Panthers team is like that one, but it's still the Panthers. That's my reasoning.
All right.
49ers would be tougher.
I think that the thing that really puts it over the edge is Kaepernick's experience. Whether Kaepernick is a better quarterback than Cam Newton or not, that remains to be seen, obviously. But I think his experience...
I think Newton is definitely better.
Maybe so, but the fact
More
that...
durable. I mean, a power runner. Kaepernick's a quick runner.
They're both tough to defend. They're both good young quarterbacks. But I think because Kaepernick led the 49ers to the Super Bowl.
Kaepernick. I think Newton's definitely better.
Okay, Newton doesn't matter whether he's a better quarterback or not. Kaepernick's experience leading his team to the Super Bowl last year, as opposed to Cam, who's that's exactly what I'm talking about. Playoff experience. Cam is an unproven quarterback in a team that is in its first year of success. So I would say that Kaepernick is the better playoff quarterback, and I think he has a chance to make the 49ers a tougher matchup.
Alrighty, so now we're going to talk about the hotly debated subject of Nelson freaking Cruz. Of course, the rumors have been swirling all over the place about, are the Mariners going to sign him? They're definitely talking, the team is definitely talking to Cruz, so that's something to watch. I say that the Mariners should sign Nelson Cruz, and then sign another I would say sign Cruz, trade for a pitcher like David Price. You could trade. I think pitching prospects become expendable when you sign a guy like Cruz who could solidify your lineup like that. Your WAR stats don't matter that you're about to say.
WAR stats don't matter, Marshall? Mr. Obsessed with WAR, Marshall Charrington. He's obsessed with WAR. And here's a WAR stat for you. In the exact same number of games last season, Nelson Cruz had a 2.6 WAR, and Michael Saunders had a 3.3 WAR. I do not think you should sign Nelson Cruz. His bat, his 20-plus, 25-plus home runs, which will dip at Safeco, is not nearly enough to make up for his atrocious defense.
And that was aided by some steroids. So
Exactly. With Franklin Gutierrez on an incentive-laden deal back, and with Michael Saunders potentially playing center and some right, and then you also have Dustin Ackley who can play center or right.
Teams have been calling about Ackley, and just get him out of here. Why not?
Yeah, I do not think you should sign Cruz. I think you should spend if the story about the Mariners wanting to keep their payroll below $100 million is true, they should absolutely not sign Cruz and sign a pitcher instead. Because there are so many other ways you can get an outfielder. We have some outfield flexibility with Saunders, Ackley, Gutierrez, Corey Hart, Logan Morrison. We got a lot of guys that can play different outfield
and then
positions.
You said the other day that the Mariners could get Giancarlo Stanton for Seager and Walker, which is total BS.
No, I don't think so. I think Taijuan Walker is considered by not just the Mariners, but by the rest of the MLB as one of, if not the best pitching prospect in the major leagues. He came up last year and proved that he can.
He's a good pitching prospect. He's not the best pitching prospect.
He's one of the best pitching prospects in recent times. He's the fact that people are saying we shouldn't trade him.
Strasburg.
Obviously, those guys were fantastic. But the fact that it's being that a Taijuan Walker for David Price trade is being considered shows you how good of a pitcher Taijuan Walker is. Also, the Marlins are cheap. They've proven to be cheap over the years. After this season, Giancarlo Stanton will be arbitration eligible, and I don't think the Marlins are going to want to pay him. I think they're going to want to trade him and get something for him. I think Taijuan Walker and Kyle Seager is the ticket to Giancarlo Stanton. You do that and you sign a free agent pitcher, then this Mariners team all of a sudden becomes lethal. Think about the outfield. It becomes Gutierrez and Saunders and mixed in center field with Giancarlo Stanton in right and Corey Hart in left field. That is an insane amount of power. With Cano, Stanton, and Corey Hart, that's unstoppable. And I think you move Nick Franklin over to third, where he plays an acceptable third base, and his team becomes fantastic.
That's not even going to happen because Stanton would not be traded for Seager and freaking Taijuan Walker. I mean, Seager's good and all, but he's not a guy who's going to draw that much appeal in a trade like that. I think you need to trade both those guys and add in 2 more prospects at least, or Nick Franklin. You're not going to get Stanton, one of the best players in the major leagues, possibly a top 5, top 3 player in the National League, for Walker and Seager. You got to add more to that package. That's never going to get done. If that was possible, I think they would already done it. But knowing the Mariners management, they probably would.
Knowing the Mariners management, they're going to
give us more for Seager and Walker.
Knowing the Mariners management, they're going to screw up and sign Nelson Cruz. That would be a massive mistake.
No, they're gonna make a great move and sign Cruz.
We are going to continue some Mariners talk. We just talked about a couple hitters the Mariners could potentially acquire. But I think the big step and the big thing that the Mariners need to do is get some pitching. Hopefully that becomes Tanaka, the ace from Japan, but it's looking less and less likely.
Masahiro Tanaka.
It's looking less and less likely that he's going to be posted. But if he does get posted, I think the Mariners need to spend the full $20 million posting fee and pursue him very hard. I think the fact that Tanaka and Iwakuma were teammates on a championship team in Japan does hold some weight, and I think they should make as hard of a push as they possibly can to get him.
And if they get Tanaka, do you trade Walker for David Price?
I think if you get Tanaka, you got to pull the string on that deal. Think about the pitching staff if you get Tanaka and make that trade. It's Felix Hernandez, Iwakuma, David Price, Tanaka, and James Paxton.
I think that Price would go ahead of. I would put Price ahead of Iwakuma.
Yeah,
just
you're
go
right.
righty lefty, righty lefty.
Yeah,
I think that would be
agree.
a money rotation,
and that becomes the best pitching staff in Major League Baseball. Assuming Tanaka pans out to be what everyone thinks he is, he could go the Yu Darvish route and pan out, or he could go the Daisuke Matsuzaka route and not pan out. So if the Mariners get him, then I think you do make that deal for Taijuan Walker for David Price.
And then you had some other fake trades. Right?
Well, first I think we should talk about some other pitchers. Like Matt Garza is the guy that I really think the Mariners should go after if they don't get Tanaka. I think Garza is sort of in that Jake Peavy.
He has a draft pick. Does he have?
No, Matt Garza is one of the guys that doesn't have a draft pick conversation. He's sort of in that Jake Peavy, just like a gamer, a real bulldog out there that can go give you hard starts every time and eat up a lot of innings. So I think Garza would be a huge addition for this pitching staff.
I heard that the Mariners were still talking to Santana's agents.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that.
Honestly, he wasn't good with the Angels, and then he went to the Royals, and suddenly he just became like a $80 million pitcher.
Yeah,
just because he went
the
to
price
the Royals.
he's been asking for some pretty ridiculous money, which I don't think he'll get. But I don't think the Mariners should overspend for a guy like that. I do think they should add a starter, but I don't think he's the guy. And I think I've heard Ubaldo Jimenez as the guy as being considered the best free agent pitcher on the market. But I think the fact that
he's declined in recent years.
Yeah, he's declined. I think the fact that Garza doesn't require draft pick compensation makes him the guy that I would go after. And now the big question is, the Mariners have been thought to pursuing some closers. Do you think the Mariners...
Just get Balfour.
You think the Mariners should sign a closer? What's wrong with Farquhar? I like Farquhar.
I don't know if Balfour's salary would fit into the payroll.
Lord Farquhar.
Because I think Balfour, he got, what did he get with the Orioles before it got all terminated and stuff? Like 2 years, 20 something.
Was it 20 something?
It might have been 15. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it was about 15.
Yeah, I think Balfour's great, but I don't think that's the highest priority on the Mariners list right now.
Yeah,
I think it goes starter, outfield bat, and then it goes relief pitcher, kind of like a Fernando Rodney.
Yeah.
Who were we just talking? Oh, Balfour.
Yeah,
I think Balfour is a good one. But yeah, there's some higher priorities for the Mariners right now, but I think Farquhar would do fine as well. And then some other fake trades that Jackson thought of: Paxton and Nick Franklin for Billy Butler. Another trade of Jackson's that I think is BS.
I think the thing with that trade is I just don't know. I don't know where he fits in the lineup, because we already have a couple corner infield type guys with Smoke, Logan Morrison, and Corey Hart. But I think
I'd try and slip a Morrison or Smoke in there. One of those weird.
I think you can definitely include one of those guys because they're young, and even though the Royals already have a first baseman, Eric Hosmer, I think guys like Logan Morrison and Justin Smoke are still young enough that they're potentially worth including. And I think Butler
would fit nice behind Cano.
exactly, and he declined a little bit last year, but he's still only 27 years old, and so
Butler?
Yeah.
Jeez, it's just because of his weight he's declined.
Yeah, he declined. He dropped like 10 home runs from 2012 to 2013, but
he still had the average in RBI.
exactly. And so I think Butler would be an interesting name to add because the Royals already have their starting first baseman Eric Hosmer. So he's a guy that I think could potentially be traded. I think the Mariners could potentially make a play. We'll see.
And then the other one, we already talked about Walker and Seager. So I think that's it for our Mariners talk. That's definitely the talk of the year right now, besides all the Seahawks stuff. So I think we'll move on to some Husky football and basketball.
So the Huskies are going to play their bowl game against BYU on December 27th.
And arguably one of the best stadiums in Major League Baseball, AT&T Park. Such a nice stadium. Just thought I'd add that in there.
They're transforming it into a football stadium for this game, obviously.
Looks pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, I saw the picture. It's
like
sort of weird looking,
like the
but
Pinstripe Bowl last
yeah,
year,
exactly.
Syracuse or whatever.
And I think the game is actually going to be kind of a fun one against BYU, who's got some playmakers on offense. Their quarterback Taysom Hill is a great dual threat quarterback. He's run for over 1,200 yards, along with passing for just under 3,000.
Yeah, the first quarterback in BYU history to pass for over 2,000 yards and rush for over 1,000 yards in the same season. So that's obviously saying something, especially since he's a sophomore. They also have a running back whose rushing stats are almost identical to Hill's. Run for about 1,200 yards. Jamal Williams, I think.
Jamal Williams.
So they have that dual-headed rushing attack, which will be something to watch. So I think Danny Shelton, John Timu, Shaq Thompson, Evan Hudson, those guys are going to have big games. Hauli Kikaha, those guys are going to have big games stopping the run. They're not like a huge threat through the air, but I think Parker and Peters can contain them there. So
yeah, their number one receiver, Cody Hoffman, only has 727 receiving yards on the season. So I think Marcus Peters, he's one of the best cornerbacks in the conference, should be able to shut him down.
Yeah, and then looking at the other side of the ball for both teams, the defense of BYU is very impressive. Their guys up front. Keith Price told me that he's been really impressed by their guys up front, and he knows that a lot of them will go high in the draft, like Kyle Van Noy, the All-American linebacker. I think there's a pretty good defensive lineman up there, and that'll be something to watch. And he also said the key to the game for them will be not turning it over, which obviously you can hear that. Every quarterback says that, but That's very important against to keep his composure with the pass rush from Van Noy and some of those other guys on the defensive line. So that'll be something to watch. And then the Husky offense, best offense in Husky history, has averaged over 500 yards a game.
That's crazy,
which is nuts. So it'll be a battle of this. I think the real fun battle to watch will be the Husky offense versus the BYU defense. I think the other sides of the ball will be fun to watch, but I think the Huskies defense over the BYU offense gives them the edge in this game, and I think the Huskies will pull it out. I want to say 35-28.
That's a pretty close game. I think it's a good prediction. And I think obviously one of the big storylines is the interim coaching staff for UW with Sark going to USC. So Chris Peterson has said he's not gonna coach the bowl game. He's gonna leave it to the staff. So I think to see how that goes is going to be definitely something interesting to watch. But I think the maturity of leaders like Keith Price, Bishop Shanky, and Austin Safarian-Jenkins will be able to lead the offense to some success. And I think the defense has got some leaders as well. But they'll come together, and I expect them to play pretty well. I'm going to go with the score prediction of 31-24.
It's a solid prediction. I'm always sketchy just predicting 28 because there's inevitably going to be a field goal during the game.
Yeah.
That's such a sketch score prediction. But also I just wanted to ask you, who is your offensive and defensive MVPs this year?
The offensive MVP, I think, is Bishop Sankey. I thought he...
Give me someone other than Bishop Sankey, because he's obvious.
Other than Bishop Sankey. I think Keith Price played really well in a bounce back year. I think Jadon Mickens was a big weapon at the receiver position. Those are a couple guys that I think had really strong seasons. But I think Stanky is really obviously the guy that made the whole machine run. I think he was deserving to be an All-American, which he ended up being on the second team.
Missed by one
Just
slot.
missed, yeah.
Yeah, for me, offensive MVP, I gotta give it to a really underrated player, Mike Christ, the center. Provided stability along the offensive line, didn't miss a snap during the season, played really well, opened up those holes for Sankey, was the leader of the offensive line. I thought he played very well this season. I feel like once his career at Washington is over, he could find his way onto an NFL team as an undrafted free agent.
I like it.
That'll be something interesting to watch. And also, their whole offensive line returns, so I think that should be the strength of the team next year. And for defensive MVP, I have to go with the big man on the corner, Marcus Peters. Played very well this year, contained Brandon Cooks the best he's been contained by any team this year. He also had lockdown coverage. I think he had about 6 interceptions or so on the year. He played very well. I think he should have been first team All Pac-12, even though he was snubbed off that team. I think he'll find a future in the NFL. So Marcus Peters and Mike Christ.
I'm gonna say Shaq Thompson for defensive MVP. He's all over the field. He's dynamic. He just makes plays for this team when they need to be made. So he's my defensive MVP. And I think the Huskies have a good shot to win this game. Hopefully they can finish the season strong.
Unfortunately, we have to talk about the Husky basketball team. No, I'm just kidding. They played a good game. Looked like they were going to win it the first half, but as they say, basketball games are not won or lost in the first half.
Yeah, they were up by 14 midway through the first half. They ended up losing the game by 12. Shabazz Napier, who's one of the contenders for National Player of the Year, had 15 of his 20 points in the second half. Really took control of the game.
Yeah, I was watching it on Gamecast, and I saw they were up 14. I was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. And then I looked back 5 minutes later, and they're down 4 heading into the half. I was like, there's back to reality.
Yeah, this team is sort of a tough one to watch. It seems like it's a transition year. I really like Williams Goss. I like Wilcox a lot, but it's too bad he's going to be gone because there should be most other players returning. But, I mean, I was optimistic about this team going into the year. And with Desmond Simmons returning soon, I think he can make a big difference defensively, on interior defense, and rebounding. So I think we can't truly judge this team until we see them play a few games with Simmons because he's definitely a difference maker.
Yeah, I think talking about next year, which is probably the outlook most Huskies fans have right now, I think Robert Upshaw is going to be a catalyst in the middle. The 7-footer out of Fresno I think he just looks like a beast. Just watching him in warm-ups and sitting on the bench, he just looks like a beast. I think he should really help the Huskies inside. They haven't had that true post presence as of late. I think him and Kemp and Simmons will all work well together.
And Jernard Giroux should be returning.
Yeah, add in Jernard. That's a nice team with Nigel Williams-Goss and Andrew Andrews. Mm-hmm. They'll have to find that true leader, but I think the team next year looks pretty good.
Agreed. I think that's all we got for the day.
There's not a ton to talk about.
They're not that good.
Basketball.
They're not going to be that good most likely. So, time for our shout out to the end, Marshall. Who you got?
I'll give it to you right now because I have to think for a second.
My shout out is going to the New England Patriots. They put a drubbing on the Ravens this weekend. They had 2 defensive touchdowns late in the game. The offense was looking potent, and I think they are decimated by injuries right now. But if any team can win the AFC, New England Patriots. Watch out for them in the Super Bowl, boys.
We all know that you're not a real Seattle sports guy. You're
Please.
a Boston fan, you piece of whatever.
Patriots.
My shout out to my boy, my homie, talk all the time, Mr. Robinson Cano. Just saw him in a commercial, but I'm still just so pumped about him. I remember when I found out in school, I was on Twitter, and I was just like, oh, no way. The Mariners signed one of the best players in the MLB. That that high still hasn't worn off, and I'm just so excited to watch him play this year. Hopefully I get his jersey for Christmas. Mom and Dad, shout out. But yeah, I'm just excited to watch Robinson Cano play.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. You know the drill. Why don't you like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We'll keep reading.
We'll catch you next time, and hopefully get this going every other week or maybe even monthly again. But we'll see.
Thanks, guys.
Take